Sportbike and today we're going to install a Galfer rear wave rotor on our 2014 STG Road Racing World Honda CBR 1000RR project bike. We're going to walk you through the process to install this. Galfer makes some of the finest brake components out there today. I'm sure it's a name that you're quite familiar with at this point. Let's talk about why we're doing this, okay? Number one, look at that. This thing is beautiful as compared to that OE rotor. We're also going to lose some weight as compared to that OE rotor. Okay, it's rotational mass, so that weight is important because it's amplified as that is spinning. Honestly, from my perspective, the number one reason to do this is it's going to look sweet on the bike, and we all like to make our bikes our own. When you're replacing rotors, it is important to A, read everything that is included in the package. I find that can be very beneficial, can help you save yourself from making a mess, right? They've got some loose instructions here they want you to follow. Google torque specs online if you want to use a torque wrench when you do it. That's not a bad idea. All those specs are available to you very easily if you do have a torque wrench to use. The keys here are going to be, if you're putting rotors on, you need to put new brake pads on. Okay, don't use old brake pads and install new rotors. Install the two at the same time and then go through the proper bed-in procedure, okay? I know a lot of people think, new rotor, new pads, perfect brakes, brand new brakes, 100% stopping power immediately. It's not the case. They need to wear in together, okay? You need to transfer friction material from the brake pad onto the rotor in order for this to work correctly, okay? If you go out there and you get yourself into panic stop situations or race style situations before the pads are seated to the rotors, you'll generate a tremendous amount of heat, okay, because you don't have the same level of friction. It amps up the heat. That heat flows into the rotor, it will warp the rotor, and you will take and damage all the components you have just installed. They're recommending a bedding procedure of about 100 miles. That's mostly applicable on the street. If you're a racer or a track rider, you're not typically going to have 100 miles at your disposal to bed in. So you need to get it done a little quicker, and the race compound pads sometimes will seat faster. You need to be cognizant of that, especially if you're a racer or a track day guy and this stuff's brand new. Go out there, right, and go through a good session or so and really bed those brakes in slowly. That will give you the best performance and also the most longevity possible. Now let's go ahead and dive in. What is it going to take to do this job? Okay, we got to get a socket for the rear axle. Okay, I'm going to replace the brake pad. So one thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to compress the caliper piston and do that before I pull it off the bike. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I've got my handy little speed bleeder bag and hose kit here. It's just a great way to trap fluid so we don't make a big mess. I do have rags and brake cleaner over here. I'm going to go ahead and slide this over. Our bleeder screw. So down there nice and tight. We can go ahead and crack the screw open. And once I have that open, I'm going to go ahead and compress the caliper pistons back here. And once I've got that compressed, I'm holding it like so. Okay, so basically a zero mess situation here, which is preferred. Move that slowly. All the fluid runs down into the bag. We'll reuse this when we do bleed the system off. It's not necessary to do it this way. I don't like to compress a caliper piston and force the fluid up and through the master into the reservoir. Okay, the fluid down the calipers experience the most heat. There can be over time, depending on the age of the motorcycle, like be some water in there, there could be some debris in there, so it's best if you just force that stuff out of the caliper into the bag. Now, we are ready to break loose the retainer pin for the brake pads in the rear. I'm going to do that right there. Just want to get that loose. Over and put the rear axle on. It's a pretty simple procedure. It's the type of job that you have the proper tools. You know, I would say you're looking at an hour or less at the maximum. It's also a great opportunity to really clean up that rear wheel mice when you have it on the motorcycle, which we will do. I'm going to go ahead and get it over here. I've got a tool cart that we're going to use. Make it a little easier to work on. Okay. Let's go ahead and get it over to the other side here. A 3/8 ratchet. Use a good quality Allen. We've got 6mm Allens being used here. Got snap-on tools that we're going to use. Put this up on edge like so. From the factory, there should be Loctite used here. You can also do that. Get some Loctite and reuse the bolts. You can buy new rotor bolts. Some folks do that. Myself, I've always just reused them. Never had an issue. Get the T-handle here. Best time to clean the wheel is when the rotor is off. You see we've got red thread locker on there. So once I have this unbolted, I'm going to begin cleaning up the wheel. Okay, here we go now. I got the wheel all cleaned up. I cleaned up the sprocket carrier. That's just a great time to do that. We've got the ability to pull the carrier and the rotor off at the same time, clean the wheel up real nice. Okay, time to put the rotor on. This, you have to assume, is going to have some type of anti-corrosion material on it, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a minute and clean the face of the rotor. This is something you should always do, right? Because there is a very strong possibility that they've used something to keep this from corroding. So you want to take a minute and kind of see on there obviously was something on it. I'll take a minute and wipe that off a little bit. Get as much of that off as possible. Even just take and go like this. And kind of give it a rinse. This is a good old school brake cleaner, so stuff evaporates super nice. Okay, now let's go ahead and fit that to the wheel. Their stuff is obviously all precision machined. I mean, you can see that thing lines up perfectly. One of the things you're going to want to do is make sure that these faces are perfectly clean. You don't want anything in between the rotor and or the wheel. So take a second and do that. Thread locker. We're going to put a little bit of red on each one of these bolts before we put them back in. Run down with the T-handle and then chase behind it with a torque wrench. Torque wrench is kind of a personal choice. I'll be real honest with you. I was a mechanic for a long time. I don't normally use it, especially for stuff like this. You know, at the end of the day, the goal is to get the pull even. And if you spend enough time with tools, you can usually, you know, pretty much get there on your own. These are shoulder bolts. So you make sure they pass the hole in the rotor. Notice I'm not really running any of these down securely. Just get them close to seating. Okay, now run a little crisscross pattern here. You can see that obviously it's going to look absolutely amazing on this motorcycle. Go ahead and throw a little torque at it. Not gonna hurt anybody here. Look up your torque specs online. That information is readily available. Kind of get hit this in 2 stages, about 20 at it right now. I think what I found was a little higher than that. Dial that in right now. Then we'll be ready to slide that sprocket carrier back in. Okay. Side, turn it over. Get the rubber bumpers in place. Line up our sprocket carrier here. Vortex sprocket on there, sweet 520 Vortex sprocket on there, red, but sweeps the sheen down, looks super cool. Okay, now, next thing I want to do, and I just want to do this before I go ahead and put my wheel on. I just spent a lot of time cleaning it. I'm going to come over here now, I'm going to swap out the brake pads real quick. Something you want to do here is make sure this floating caliper is properly lubricated, okay? Caliper that can move back and forth easily on its own is a happy caliper, okay, and that keeps the brake pads wearing properly, keeps the brakes functioning as designed. Okay. The brake pads pulled out, they're factory, they're in good shape, you can actually see them, they have a lot of wear on them, we're going to replace them. Anyways, they recommend that you do, that's up to you, whether you choose to follow that recommendation or not. Now, we want to go ahead take the caliper apart here. So we can lubricate the sliders nicely. I'm going to hose this down with brake cleaner a little bit too, so the brake dust and stuff off. Anytime you got your bike apart like this, just a great choice to just take a minute, just clean things up. Keep it nice, got a lot invested in it, and you know, it takes a minute. Get some of the nasty stuff off of here. Nice part about this is it evaporates super fast. Go ahead and do that here with the caliper as well. Give that a minute to evaporate. Now we'll hit the lubrication points. A nice silicone lube that I like to use. I'll put a little bit on the end of this screwdriver. Right, work it into here. I like to work it around inside, make sure you coat the inside of the bore, right, so that it's going to move freely, easily. You don't want to pack too much of this stuff in here, because at the end of the day, that's not going to do anything for you, okay? Got the other one right down here. Wipe off the excess, like so. Now, we are ready to begin with the assembly. So get our brake pads here. Slide the brake pads up into position, so. Groove, slide that pin in through there. You want to inspect that pin for grooves or wear, anything that the brake pad could hang up on when it's trying to slide back and forth. Because if that is binding at all, okay, and the brakes are binding, you are essentially giving away 3 horsepower because it now becomes harder for it to rotate the rear wheel. once we get this seated a little bit, we're not going to tighten anything. We're going to grab the wheel and begin to put it back. Okay, got the tire up here, we're ready to roll it back down. I'm going to confess, my favorite position to put a tire back on is when I have the bike on the ground. Okay, I feel like I'm a little bit of a disadvantage here on the work table because I really like to use my foot to support that tire. The first thing we're going to check is let's make sure we've got our brake pads in the caliper properly so that there's enough distance for the rotor to slide up inside the caliper, right? I already dipped that down on there a little bit, it slides on, no problem. I've got the rear caliper now located in the groove in the swing arm that it slides back and forth. Come over to the other side, grab the chain, get that brake over that sprocket, and now we're going to go ahead and lift this up a little bit, like so. And over here on the other side, grab the axle, begin to slide that bad boy through. Let's get lined up with our rear cal handle, and through it goes. Go ahead and get the axle block back in place. Washer. What are the other things you should do while we're here? Check your chain tension. There's other maintenance items. We've got a nice clean wheel. We've got brake pads, right? We can bleed these off later if we choose to. Check our chain tension. But for our purpose today, we're just going to go ahead and keep doing what we started, and that's just finish the rotor install. Let's go ahead and get that down to where it's just about got a little tension on it. Grab the ratchet. One of the tricks that I like to use. This chain's already perfectly lined up from the last time I rode it, okay? I like to take a wrench, wedge it in between the sprocket and the chain, or roll back. This puts pressure, right, on the axle driving forward. And I like to take it, just whack it a couple of times like that. Come back here. This is going to ensure that my axle blocks are held firmly against the adjuster screws, right? Get the axle torqued nicely to spec, like so. Go ahead and move this cart out of our way now. Last couple little things we need to do. Let's make sure we finished our brake job. Let's go ahead and get this bad boy tightened up. Just continue using the 8mm wrench that I had out. Get the pin tight. Let's get our rear slider tight. See how that caliper floats back nice and easy. That's really important. Okay, now let's pump up our brake pedal. Noise you're hearing there is just simply the pads sliding against the rotor. Okay, next up, we're going to bleed the brakes. We've shown you how to do that a million times through all of our brake bleed videos, right? To do that, I'm going to go ahead and use the same stuff we started off with here. The only thing you're not going to see me do, I don't have a bottle of brake fluid here in my hands right now, so you're not going to see me refill the fluid. I'm going to give this bad boy just a quick little bleed. Pump it up, hold it down. Keep an eye on the fluid level here. That actually feels perfect. We'll give it one last little one. Fluid's a little to the low side now. You can clearly see that right here. There's our lever travel. Pull this off slowly. Zero mess. Gotta love this bag. That's $10 I'll ever spend. I've been using this one for a couple of seasons too, so it really lasts a long time. You're able to drain it. And let's take a look at our finished product. We're going to talk again about brake bedding procedures. Number one, the thing looks absolutely gorgeous with the rear sets, the exhaust, the shock. Lost a little weight back here, that's good. Okay, the last thing we need to talk about is brake bedding procedure. Okay, we walk you through everything, pump this up, make sure we're good, check the fluid. I'm a little low, I'm gonna fill that before I ride, don't worry about it, right? Check everything back here, double check it, triple check it. If you're not confident doing this, you've seen the procedure, take it to your dealer, have a licensed mechanic do it. Now, for bedding, okay? Their instructions are 100 miles. If you have the ability to follow that, follow that. I'm gonna confess, that's a little to the extreme side, okay? That's a little CYA right there on their list. Go out, very easy stops. You will feel the brakes come in, right? When they start to come in, continue with the easy stops, go from easy to moderate, and then once you feel the bedding is there and you have 100% braking power, you can begin using the motorcycle normally, but commit to that brake bedding procedure. If you don't transfer friction material to that rotor, it's never gonna work right. If you put yourself in an emergency stop situation, when they're not bedded in, it will overheat and warp the rotor. There will be no warranty. You will throw away all the parts you put on the motorcycle. It'll overheat the pads and rotor. It'll overheat the rotor and warp it. It'll all be junk. Take your time, bed it in, and it'll serve you well for a long time. This is our Galfer rear wave rotor install on our 2014 STG Road Racing World Honda CBR 1000 RR.